The B-2 crews kept to themselves. You didn't talk much if you flew something that wasn't supposed to exist in daylight. Most of them spoke with their eyes, not their mouths. But the Maverick detachment? They made noise. Every few years, Top Gun would rotate one or two of their elite instructors into the stealth base. Cross-branch flight synergy, someone had called it. This year, it was Captain Drew Lex Stanton. Sharp, fast, confident. The kind of pilot who knew exactly what the sky owed him. The morning he arrived, she was already there. No one remembered when she started working the checklist room. Some thought she was Air Force logistics, others swore she was civilian. No rank, no patch. Just a worn flight line badge. See Ren. She didn't look at anyone. Didn't need to. Lex noticed her only because she didn't flinch when the B-2s spooled up. Everyone else did. Even seasoned pilots turned their heads when the twin engines whispered to life like thunder that hadn't made up its mind yet. But she stood still, clipboard in hand, boots dusty, hair pinned tight, watching the wings like they owed her something. That first week, no one paid her much attention. The younger Maverick techs joked she probably misfiled half the checklist. One called her the ghost in the print room. She said nothing, did nothing. Just kept checking off calibration tags and walking the same quiet path between the hangars and the fuel station. But Lex started noticing more. She watched every takeoff, not like a spectator, like someone measuring something. Her eyes didn't follow the shape, they followed the sound. Once, during taxi, a new pilot held throttle too long past checkpoint 2. The tower hadn't called it yet, but she had. Lex was nearby when she muttered quiet, firm. "That's 2 seconds past stable. He's dragging the surge." The tower call came 3 seconds later. Lex turned. She didn't look at him, just marked a box, walked away. By week 2, the Maverick team had taken over Hangar 3. Glossy patches, fast turns, endless talk about throttle curves and radar shade. Half the time, it felt like a commercial shoot with classified fuel. She kept her distance, still carried the same clipboard, still wore the same black gloves with the palms worn raw. Her boots didn't shine. Her badge was clipped low. Most assumed she was admin, maybe a file tech left over from the last rotation. The jokes grew louder. "Bet she couldn't tell a stabilizer from a sandwich. She probably thinks invisible means off the books." They laughed. She never did. But Lex had stopped laughing. Not because of a moment, because of the pattern. She never missed a takeoff cue. When the B-2s rotated for silent taxi drills, she stood in the shadow of the hangar, marking fuel line adjustments seconds before the telemetry updated. She didn't need numbers, she knew them. And then there was the glove. One afternoon, a Maverick pilot dropped a checklist binder across her desk. Loose pages. Misordered. Mess. Without saying a word, she picked it up, reassembled it page, by memory, and slid it back. But what caught Lex wasn't her hands. It was the way she touched the paper. With the edge of her glove pulled back, 2 fingers bare. Like someone who used to hit touchscreen controls inside a cockpit. He leaned against the file cabinet nearby. "You ever fly?" Morales asked. She didn't look up. "Once," she answered, her gaze fixed on the floor. Morales raised a brow. "What kind of airframe?" Her voice was flat, like she was reciting someone else's story. "When they said wouldn't return." He stared at her, the weight of her words settling between them. She stood, walked away without another word. But as she passed, he saw something inked faintly beneath the edge of her glove. Just a mark, a silhouette of a bird mid-dive, wings tucked tight. And underneath, in tiny print, 31 Echo. His stomach dropped. Only 4 pilots had ever flown Operation 31E. A mission flown under full stealth, zero failsafe, deep blackout. Never confirmed on paper. Lex had only heard whispers. And now, she was sorting binders? It happened during an engine brief. Hangar 3. Half the Maverick detachment crammed into the side bay, waiting for fuel spec updates. She was there, as always, silent in the back, running checklists while the rest leaned against crates and swapped stories. Tech Sergeant Briscoe was leading the briefing. Sharp, loud, always trying too hard to be liked. Midway through the segment on intake temp variation, he paused. "You know," he said, grinning, "some of these checklists are so outdated, I'm surprised the ghost back there hasn't tried to file them on microfilm." Laughter. She didn't react. Briscoe glanced over. Still nothing. "Seriously, who even is she?" he said. "Anyone ever seen her near a flight deck?" More laughter. This time, Lex didn't laugh. He watched her shift slightly, just a small adjustment of weight onto her back heel. Her hand paused halfway through a page turn. That was all. But to Lex, it felt louder than shouting. He stood slowly. Hey, Briscoe. Briscoe turned. Yeah? You like flying blind? What? Lex walked forward steady. You like trusting your life to data? To margins? You like knowing the system that holds your wings didn't miss one detail at Mach .95? Briscoe shrugged, thrown off. Sure? Lex nodded toward her. Then maybe shut your mouth when the person who invented half your checklist is in the room. Silence. No more grins. Someone in the back whispered. Wait, what? Lex ignored it. He looked at her. She still hadn't spoken. Still hadn't looked at anyone. But her hand moved again. Turned the page. Pressed the corner flat. And in that small, precise motion, Lex saw it again. The rhythm of someone who'd spent hours in flight. Not minutes. Not a file tech. Not a contractor. A pilot. A B-2 Spirit veteran. Briscoe cleared his throat. I didn't know. Lex didn't blink. She did. That's why she didn't need to say anything. No one laughed after that. Not that day. Not the next. Lex couldn't let it go. Not the silence. Not the precision. And definitely not that phrase. When they said wouldn't return. So he started digging. Quietly. He called in a favor to a flight systems analyst he knew at Whiteman. Just a question about checklist line formatting from Operation Era B-2s. What came back wasn't a document. It was a pause, followed by, that operation doesn't officially exist, and if she knows those terms, she wasn't support crew. Lex sat alone in his quarters that night, flipping through old base pamphlets and cross-referencing archived training footage. He found a single clip from 13 years back, a grainy, night-shot segment showing a B-2 refueling at altitude under blackout protocol. The pilot's face was never shown, but there was a voice on the flight log audio. Female. Calm. Steady. Fuel red 1.6. Recalibrating manually. No assist. Do not interrupt drift. I have it. He played it twice, then again. It was her. The tone didn't just match. It carried the same weight. The kind of voice that doesn't come from instruction. It comes from surviving something no one else saw. The next morning, Lex checked her file again. Still nothing official. No combat record. Just a general badge number linked to Aircraft Resource Logistics. He scanned the clearance log. There was one redacted entry from 9 years ago. Level 3 lockout. No branch assigned. Just a code. 31E. That was it. He stepped outside. The base was quiet. She stood by the hangar again, watching another B-2 prep for taxi. Same posture. Same gloves. Same eyes. Lex walked over slowly. You flew it, didn't you? He asked. She didn't move. I listened to your voice last night, he continued. Still nothing. Lex tried again. You were the one who landed it without tower. Finally she spoke. Only because the system failed, she replied. Lex took a breath. They said 31E was unrepeatable. She nodded once. That's why I didn't go back. Lex looked at her hands, still steady, still quiet. You know they buried your name? He asked softly. She turned slightly. That's what stealth is for, she said. He didn't argue. Didn't press. Because now he understood. She wasn't forgotten. She was erased, by request. It happened on a Friday. Simroom 3. Full crew in rotation. One B-2 pilot in the chair, the other on standby. High pressure test, stealth route, mid-air calibration, emergency override. The usual. Until the telemetry froze. All screens stalled mid-feed. Power flickered. And the pilot's voice crackled through the room. I've got 0 on return curve. Flight assist is dropping. The tech at the console jumped forward. Could be a false alarm, Lex cut in. That's not a false read. That's a thermal surge. One of the junior officers turned. How do you know? He asked. Lex didn't answer. Because she was already moving. She walked in from the corner, clipboard still in hand, and stepped beside the console like she belonged there. Her voice didn't rise. She didn't panic. She just pointed at the fuel compensation line. He's flying 0.8 under drag offset, she explained calmly. The intake thinks he's climbing. He's not. The room went quiet. Another screen began to flicker, altitude drift now visible. The tech frowned. But this override doesn't exist, she didn't answer. Just reached into her satchel and pulled out a folded sheet of laminate. Old. Faded. A checklist in clean handwriting. She slid it across the console. Have him switch to manual 3B, she instructed. The tech hesitated. Lex stepped in. Do it, he ordered. The command was relayed. Moments later, the pilot's voice cut back through. Stabilizing. Intake confirms. Powers holding. Silence. Then the pilot spoke again. Who was that? No one answered. She was already walking out. The lead controller turned to Lex. That line wasn't in the current checklist, he noted. Lex nodded. That's because it was used once. On 31E, he replied. The controller blinked. That mission didn't have a surviving flight officer, the controller said carefully. Lex looked toward the door. She didn't survive it, he said. She carried it. No one said another word. Later that night, the pilot came down from sim, quiet, eyes scanning the hangar. He found her standing beside the fuel bay, hands behind her back. He didn't salute. Not yet. He just walked up, slowly, then held up the checklist she'd left behind. I've never seen this version, he said. She looked at it once, then said, You weren't supposed to. Then she turned to go. But the pilot didn't move. He slipped off his glove and saluted her with bare hand, palm steady. No one ordered it. No one asked him to. But the line chief saw it. And so did Lex. She paused at the door, nodded once, then disappeared into the dark. By Monday, the tone on base had shifted. No one said her name out loud. Not because they didn't know it, but because they weren't sure how to say it anymore. Wren. Not just. The file tech. Not. Ghost girl. Now? Some whispered it like a call sign. Some like it was rank. The checklist room, once ignored, now drew quiet attention. Pilots passed slower, glanced inside, looked for her. She didn't change anything. Still wore the same faded gloves. Still walked the hangar edges like a shadow, not a figure. But something in the way people moved near her had changed. They waited before speaking. They watched what she watched. One Maverick pilot left his manual open on her desk with a sticky note that read, Would you look this over? She never replied. But the next morning, the manual was gone, replaced with a neatly marked version, corrections in red, a single corner folded at an odd angle. Not military style, flight style. Lex noticed something else too. She no longer watched just the aircraft, she watched the people. The way they read checklists. The way they stood near the tail. One young pilot leaned too far during a visual inspection, eyes on a sensor, back toward a fuel line. Before the tech chief could bark, Wren stepped forward, reached out with one arm, fingers steady, and tapped the air beside the pilot's foot. Not on him, near him. A silent command to step back. He did. Didn't even hesitate. Didn't ask why. Just nodded. Later, Lex caught up with her near the tower stairs. You never asked for it, he said. For what? She replied. For this, he explained, gesturing toward the hangars. The reversal. The respect. She shook her head once. If you have to ask for it, she said quietly, it doesn't stay. Lex watched her for a long second. You didn't have to come back here, he told her. Not after 31E. I didn't come back for them, she answered. Lex paused. Then why? He asked. I came back for the checklist, she said. Lex frowned. The checklist? She turned slightly. If one more line saves one more crew, she said, her voice low, then the silence was worth it. Then she walked off again, the same stride, the same ghost quiet exit. Only now? People noticed. By week's end, no one called her anything but Wren. No title, no rank, just the name, said with a kind of careful respect, like it didn't belong to the same world as theirs. She hadn't been reassigned. She still wore the same base badge. But somehow, her role had shifted without paperwork. Lex noticed it first. The Maverick crews were changing, not loudly, not obviously, but steadily. One of the loudest flight techs started checking his seals twice instead of once. Another rewrote his refueling steps, then folded the page the same way Wren had. Tiny changes. Invisible, if you weren't looking. And then there was the quiet. Before taxi drills now, pilots stood still longer. Some walked alone to the edge of the line. Others tapped the wing before takeoff, a habit no one taught them. Someone asked Lex where it came from. He just said, a pilot who stopped flying, but never stopped calibrating. Wren didn't take credit. Didn't speak in meetings. Didn't change protocol. But somehow, even the instructors adjusted when she was near. One afternoon, a visiting general walked the line. He was halfway through a flight brief when he paused near the back, spotting her over a clipboard. "You there?" he called. She looked up. He blinked, then stepped closer. "What's your name, ma'am?" he asked. She hesitated, then said quietly, "Just Wren." The general looked down at the worn glove on her right hand, the one with the small inked mark barely visible now, a diving bird over the words 31 Echo. His expression changed. He didn't salute. He didn't speak. He just nodded once. Slow. Like recognition settling where no documentation ever would. She returned the nod. Nothing more. That evening, she left a folder on the command office desk. Inside was a revised checklist, her version, unlabeled, no signature. But at the bottom, on the back page, a line was handwritten. "To the ones who fly quiet. Make it count." They never saw her file it. But from that day on, the new flight recruits were handed 2 packets, the standard issue, and Wren's copy, folded once, bottom corner bent sharp, just like she did. She was gone by Monday. No announcement, no orders, no transfer sheet. Just, not there. Her desk in the checklist bay sat empty. Clipboard hung neatly on its hook, gloves folded tight beside the printer. The old satchel was gone. At first, no one said anything. Maybe she was on leave, maybe reassigned. But by midweek, it was clear. Wren had left the way she'd arrived, without noise, without permission, without needing to explain. Lex stood in the bay that afternoon, staring at the gloves she'd left behind. Same pair. Same frayed seam on the thumb. She'd written nothing. Left no messages. But things were still moving like her. Pilots were quoting checklist lines she'd never spoken aloud. Crew chiefs folded flight docs the way she always did, corner tucked, top right. And before every B-2 sim now, the room paused. Just a beat. Silent, focused. That wasn't procedure. That was memory. That was her. On the main pin board near the tarmac, someone had placed a photo. Grainy. Black and white. No label. Just a cockpit shot from years back. One gloved hand reaching for a manual override lever. Bare wrist visible. With the faint ink of a diving bird. Underneath it, a note in simple ink. She flew once. That was enough. No one touched it. No one removed it. Even the general who stopped by 2 weeks later paused in front of it, cleared his throat, and walked away without a word. Some legacies aren't saluted. They're studied. They're carried, line by line, wing by wing, in checklists written by those who'd rather forget the sky than forget the weight of returning from it. Wren never came back to the base, but every time a B-2 spun up its engines, Lex could hear it. Not the roar. The moment just before it, the hush. The space where silence does more than fill the air. It teaches.